hey, what kind of a knife should I use? I'm new to tomatoes. And like, I don't know, man. Like for specifically tomatoes, I'm not thinking in vegetables, but I guess I'll try. So.
Along with our brief detour on knife selection when cutting tomatoes, in part 2 of my chat with Elementbound, the creator of Netfox and Noray, we touched on the reliability of ChatGPT, what game types are ideal to build with Netfox, and the eternal struggle of building a game to completion. But make sure you don't miss out on the biggest multiplayer pitfall. And that's the thing, right? You can only do like the scope of what you release in Netfox is probably going to work for some spectrum of game, right? And right now as it stands, I know you're working on some event stuff like you talked about with like weapons and things. What do you think is the spectrum of games or things that, new devs are coming in and I think Netfox is easy to get up and running. You can go watch our tutorials, my tutorials or our tutorials, we'll just go with that. They can look at your demos. I think there's a lot of good info there to get up and running, but which games should we use it for? Or where does that window exist in your mind?
I think for games kind of similar to Forest Brawl are a good start. Like you have some player movement, some interaction, but that's all. So and I think this question is interesting because most people expect answers like, yeah, it's good for top-down shooters, don't do RTS games with it and such. And in my mind, it's really on a different axis that I think about it. Because from my perspective, it's mostly about what the players can do, what kind of latencies can you tolerate, what kind of interactions are there. And that's hard to translate into game genres. But I think for cooperative games, Netfox should be pretty good. Mostly because for competitive, you get all these extra requirements and it's more strict and it's more sensitive to latency or its compensation and such, especially with the fact that you can still have server authority with instant feeling local interactions. So you don't have to wait for the server's response. If you do try making an RTS game, let me know. It would probably be a fun challenge, but a difficult one.
I think I know where you're coming from because I have similar questions where you have these really broad questions like, can this work for X, Y, or Z game? And you're like, maybe. I don't know, try it out. If it works, it works, right?
Your walk into a room analogy from earlier really stuck into my mind because sometimes it feels like, hey, what kind of a knife should I use? I'm new to tomatoes. And like, I don't know, man. Like for specifically tomatoes, I'm not thinking in vegetables, but I guess I'll try. So.
It's like, oh, can I use it for first-person shooter? That's the one big question, or those Twitch style games. And I get some hesitation from you because I hear you say that, oh well, there's a lot of stuff, right, evolved in trying to get something like that working. And now, is that something that you can like foresee long term Netfox trying to support, or like how would that fit in, or is that going to be something else, like another maybe fork of it or something?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that Netfox will actually support it out of the box with different tools. Really, unfortunately, it would take time. Like that's the biggest factor for me at the moment. Because otherwise, I'm pretty confident that I can figure it out. I'm pretty confident that I have a working understanding of networking to pull this off. I am absolutely confident in my coding skills. It really just depends on the time I can spend on it, especially contiguous time, because when something doesn't work as you would expect, you really need the uninterrupted time to dig deep and figure out what's going on. It will be featured with time. And this is the other thing about Netfox's future, is that for the first version, I think it works. It does its thing. But at that point, I really couldn't have any kind of idea what people wanted to make with it. So now we had some time for the API to mature, for the feature set to extend. And the next step in my mind is to start supporting game genres specifically, which is, not necessarily giving it like an FPS synchronizer component or something, but just to get some experience of what it would be like to, let's say, build an FPS game with Netfox. What are the gaps there? What can we do? What features are necessary to make this work easier? And that's the direction I see Netfox going in the next, no idea, years, I guess.
I think you talked about it a little earlier. There are challenges that you face with the growth of the project, and one of those things is to probably get the core functionality working in terms of like what your expectations are, and the several developers that are building and supporting you also have a good scope and try to like keep everybody on track and not try to get too wide with it, because then you get something that's untested, and then now you have this like pain point of questions about this thing that you're not really quite ready to tackle yet. And have you had to kind of bring people back into scope with that so far, or in general, or anything like that lately?
In a way, yes. I mean, Netfox is pretty much me building it with contributors recently, but yeah, there are cases where people request or suggest a feature, and I kind of have to say no to them just because they don't really fit Netfox or its design. Like, one of the things I want to avoid is baking game-specific things into Netfox. Like, yeah, sure, it would be nice to have this thing that works for your game specifically, but it probably wouldn't be useful for all the other people who use the library. So in that case, I either just straight up not include it in Netfox, or if it's something that is specific to the game but can be probably reused among multiple games, then it usually ends up in the extras module. Right. But yeah, this is one boundary that I try to keep, that for Netfox, at least the core ender, it should be stuff that is strictly related to networking and is useful to pretty much every game you would build with Netfox.
Like, for example, you guys, I just remember looking into state machines, and there was a fundamental problem with that, and I didn't see it right away. And I think you knew about it. I think you had already like ran through that at some point, and there was chatter in the Discord, and then like a couple weeks later, somebody had implemented that. And I think I can't remember exactly which developer did that, but that was pretty cool to see. That was a pretty quick turnaround from, hey, I have this thing, and some guy was like, oh, I'm already, one of the developers is, I'm already working on that, and here's the draft for that. And I think you guys had been going back and forth for a while, and that was pretty cool with the state machine stuff.
Yeah, that was sub 7, and that was a pretty cool experience for me too. Because there are features that I wouldn't have implemented on my own, but then there were people either pushing for it or actually submitting PRs. So at that point, I really just had to, for example, the state machine. I remember that I just had to kind of adjust the implementation and do the documentation, which is still considerably less than having to implement the whole thing from scratch. And that also ended up being a really nice addition, because ever since I have seen many people building that things with state machines, so it's nice to have support out of the box.
You're talking about people asking you, people come in and say, hey, I want this specific feature, and like there's got to be a line, right? But as part of maintaining that, you can still develop like the extendability of it, so that if I give you the fundamental where you can go and build on top of this base Netfox code that we have here, like the big thing is the time synchronization, right? That's a huge thing, that it's a core must have working. And if there's somebody that wants some other feature, then, well, here's this interface to get to that feature if you wanted to build on top of that. And does that ever, do you know what I'm saying? Does that ever come into play when you're when you're thinking about people asking those types of questions for specifics. It's like, well, you can go and build off of this one node that we have already and implement it in your own way. Like, does that come up a lot at all?
I think it's nice that you mention it, because that's a conscious design decision from my end, is to basically to keep the library open on all levels, which right now sounds like an advert for, renting books from our store. But the idea is that I build things in layers so that you as a user can go through them. So let's say, for example, Netfox already has the rollback synchronizer. Cool, does the job. What if you don't like it? Well, then you can still use the rollback tick loop and you can roll your own. All right, cool, but you don't like the rollback tick loop. Well, you can still use the regular tick loop and then you can build your own. Well, all right, but you don't like the regular tick loop. Well, no problem. You still have the time synchronizer, so you can build your own if you want. So there's just layers and the layers of stuff you can use. Obviously, there's a drawback of having a larger API surface, but I think it pays out in the fact that if people miss some functionality, there's a possibility for them to build it themselves without having to actually modify the insides of the add-on, because it's all just exposed and then you can use it.
That's exactly what I was alluding to. And that, if you're serious about your game and, you're like, oh, I'm going to have to implement my own. Well, sometimes you just got to do that, right? If you really want it to be specific to what you're doing. And I think like there's libraries like with Unity, like Fusion. I don't know if you've ever used Fusion, Photon.
Photon, yeah.
Yeah, I think they take an opinionated approach on some things, and they, implement a lot of like, here's what you can use for your first person shooter. There's only so much you can do with, the time and support and the effort. So you have to be careful about that.
I think this kind of opinionated design works as long as you expose the underlying parts to, in a way, or like if you build it as an extra layer on top of your already existing and working solution. Like I also write a lot of Java and Kotlin at my day job, so really Spring and Spring Boot comes to my mind. Like for all the listeners who had the pleasure of never working with Spring or Spring Boot, so basically you have Spring, a framework. It's really very, very configurable in pretty much every single aspect, and that's really great. But most of the time you don't want to specify that your HTTP server should listen on port 80, because that's pretty much the case in every single application ever. So that's where you get Spring Boot, where it brings all these opinions basically with it, and it has all these nice defaults, and you don't have to mess with it, and you are really productive, and it's great as long as everything works. Because when something breaks, then in this case you have no idea what's happening. And this is why it's really nice that not only Spring Boot is exposed, but you can actually dig into the Spring configurations, so you can dive into the underlying solution and fix stuff there. So this is kind of what I try to do with Netfox as well, and this is where I think opinionated design can work strictly as an extra layer on top of what you already have.
Yeah, like the idea about having, your fundamentals, your core technologies, and then just have a place for people to make, like you already have it with the extras thing. If somebody wants to implement something on top of that stack, great, right? And I'm sure you're going to encourage that, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be core to Netfox's core repository, but I think there's probably a pathway there, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some like hidden features of Netfox that maybe you guys have implemented? Is there anything like cool in there that you guys have done that we don't know about, or that isn't regularly talked about in the chat?
There are cases where some things can work without me realizing it. Like just recently, I think even made a ticket. There are a few cases where people want to have nested rollback synchronizers, which is officially not not supported or not doable. Like the simple cases where you have your player that has its own rollback synchronizer, and then you want to attach a weapon under the player. And the weapon also has its own rollback synchronizer. And that's in theory an issue because both rollback synchronizers would want to manage the weapon. So now you simulate it twice in one take, and that makes no sense. Turns out it actually is kind of supported as long as you pawn in the weapon during gameplay, because when the player spawns, the player's rollback synchronizer finds the player and manages only that, and then you spawn the weapon, which is now only found by the weapon's synchronizer. Turns out it works, I guess. I wouldn't base my, $1 million franchise on this single feature, but you can do it. It works. The other thing, the predictive synchronizer, I have had this idea for a while based on user feedback that it would be nice to have things that are part of the rollback loop, but don't need player input, like NPCs, for example. So I made an issue to implement that eventually, and then turns out you probably can already do that since we have input prediction. So possibly I don't have to implement anything. I just need to add some documentation like, hey, this works, this is how you do it. There have been a few interesting cases on this Accord that, things just work that I did not notice or did not realize that they would, probably.
No, that's good. And that's kind of funny, it's just those things that kind of pop out, and you don't even know it until someone comes in your Discord and it's like, hey, I did this and it worked, and you're just like, oh yeah, we meant to do that, But I have my own example. I remember I originally was working with Steam and trying to get the Steam stuff to work, and I just threw Netfox in there and connected to Steam, and I think I was doing it was like a wrapper. So there's Godot Steam, and then there's like some wrappers that reference that, and then I had plugged in Netfox on top of that, and it worked. And there's a server authority, there's a host guy that's managing that you're setting to that ownership there, and it was nice. I haven't been back to that, and I'm getting a lot of questions about it, so I need to kind of circle back and make sure that everything is still functional, because I think some of the plugins I was using weren't mature yet, so I need to do another loop back and make sure that nothing broke in the meantime. But yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, and these are my favorite kinds of questions, like, hey, can I use Netfox with eNet or TCP or WebSockets or whatever? And it always fills my heart with joy to answer, like, yeah, dude, as if you can make a connection, it will work. It's RPCs all the way down, so yeah, go ahead.
I've asked you a bunch of stuff about Netfox, and do you have any like other favorite features or anything else you want to talk about with it? What's on your mind about it?
One exciting thing that is near term is the rollback synchronizer refactor, because it pretty much became a god class. It managed everything: the states, the simulation, the inputs, the transmission strategies, input prediction, basically the kitchen and the sink and everything in between. So now we are trying to decompose it, and one thing I'm kind of excited to implement, but do not take this as a promise. I have been kind of annoyed with the fact that you need to have a node to send an RPC, and I realized that you can do it without nodes. So that's one thing I want to implement and I'm excited about, is basically nodeless RPCs. Very due disclaimer, I may sound really smart in hindsight about building stuff for Godot and what to do, what not to do, etc. But in my mind, this is a huge coincidence. Like, I had a problem, I built some solution for it, and turns out there's literally hundreds of people having the same problem who are looking for the same solution, which ends up being Netfox. I try to interpret in retrospect, because for Netfox, I think it was pretty much this golden path where it was something that people wanted a solution for, but not many solutions existed. So it was a really lucky combo in this way. Because for example, with Planticons, one of the releases I did, I was quite excited about it. It's a bunch of node icons for Godot. So your scene tree is more readable in the editor. But yeah, people were not so hyped about it. And in retrospect, I think it's because there's not necessarily much demand for it. I don't feel there's too many people who wish that they would have a tiny icon of a weapon so they can put it on their weapon node in their game editor, which literally nobody will ever see aside from the developer themselves. So that was an interesting conclusion to make. So there's certainly niche things that you may end up doing.
If I'm a streamer and I'm doing development, that's going to make it more interesting to see those little icons in there. Don't sell yourself short there. So anybody listening, go get that and spice up your Godot development stream.
One interesting comment I got about the whole thing is that somebody mentioned that there's, not in this exact way, but that there's also already sites that feature hundreds or even thousands of icons. Planticons has like 50 something, so comparatively that's really measly. And I think this is the other thing that it might have been misunderstood there in a way, because yeah, sure, there are sites on the internet with literal millions of icons even, and you can just go and download them. But at least in my opinion, the difference is that these icons were specifically made for the Godot editor with its design language and color scheme in mind. Like I even had to make sure that the icons fit into a specific margin within their bounding box so they work well within the editor. Again, I don't blame anyone for not considering this, because who the hell would think about putting a 14 by 14 square in a 16 by 16 one, because that's what looks good. It's a point where it can get misunderstood.
So you actually made these icons by hand, like in Photoshop or something?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of. Partially why I did it is because it sounded like a fun challenge to make the SVG files in a single color and then generate all the variants. All the source files are in red, like the 3D nodes red in the editor, and then it generates, I think, 6 or 7 color variations. Those are all done automatically, so that was also fun to script the whole thing to create the color variations, then render them out into PNG files into different resolutions, and then optimize them, and then to bundle the whole thing. So there was a technical challenge there as well that I wanted to tackle, but yeah, I still had to do like 50 plus icons by hand in Inkscape.
Jeez, that's quite a lot of work. I mean, I don't even know how you have the time to, we have our day jobs, and then we have to, you're maintaining Netfox, and you're creating icons on top of that for the editor. I mean, kudos to you, man. Thanks for helping everybody out.
My pleasure. I hope I can build stuff that is actually useful to people besides myself. Yeah, this is my segue into another subtopic of this talk, is that it's kind of a weird feeling. Originally, I created the Discord server with a very evil marketing intention. I realized that there's all of these people who already use Netfox, so it would be nice to have a dedicated Discord server for them, which very intentionally is not the Netfox Discord server, but the Foxsake Discord server, because I figured we could do some, cross-pollination. Like, you're already in the server, it also has some sections on Blue Flame or whatever, so maybe some people would check it out, because I plan to first announce my game on that server eventually when I get there. Could be years or decades, whatever. But it would be nice to already have this bunch of people that I can just ping, and then if they like it, they can follow. If not, then they simply just don't even join that section of channels, and that's it. And it's funny to see how I ended up focusing way more on Netfox instead of building that game. And and releasing it or enhancing it in any way. I still try to kind of branch out, basically. And it's an interesting experience because I always keep thinking about people's potential reactions. Are they okay with me doing this side project? Would they instead want me to be at Netfox instead or whatever? But I guess at the end of the day, first of all, the community on the Discord is really supportive. So this is mostly me being way too concerned or more concerned than I should have. But even then, I guess I have to circle back to the fact that, this is something some guy does somewhere in Central Europe in his free time. So I guess I reserve the right to do what I want, which is mostly Netfox, but occasionally the other stuff as well. And all this segue is to, I guess, plug some stuff. One thing that I'm really excited about is Netfox merch. Hopefully by this video is out, the store will be public as well. But absolutely do check the Discord server. That was so exciting to put together. There's t-shirts, there's mugs, there's designs, there's whatever you might wish for, so make sure to grab some. And the other thing is that it might be a bit further away, but I kind of ended up writing my own unit testing library for Godot.
Nice.
Almost by accident.
Wow. How did that happen?
I started to realize that Netfox by now is large enough and has enough moving parts where I can really see the test cases that would be nice to have to make sure that, as we add new stuff, nothing else breaks. That's already there. So, all right, unit testing makes sense. Let's do it. I looked up the add-ons and pretty much Good was the only option, basically. And I have to specifically highlight that even though I had suboptimal experiences with Good, it still is a good add-on. Es ist ein gut add-on, to do the obvious German one, but it's really good. It's mature. It has a nice feature set. It has a good documentation, so it's a good one. But personally, I did not like it that much, partially because its versioning scheme was confusing to me a bit. It is recommended to use it with the latest Godot version. I cannot do that because Netfox supports earlier versions as well, so there was kind of a messing around with that. And the other thing is that when I tried it, it pops up this game window when it runs your tests, and then you get the test results, but the game window stays there. And I prefer minimal kind of distraction when I'm writing tests or running tests. I just want to just push a button, have some dedicated place for the results and for them to appear there. I kind of don't like, windows popping up and me having to close them specifically. And then I figured that actually it would be an interesting challenge on how to do this and how to handle all of this. The add-on is called West, and it already exists in a very prototypical form in Netfox. And it's kind of a fun trick. It uses tool scripts to run everything inside the editor, which is also kind of limiting. So I'm working on a proper release, which should be kind of around the corner, hopefully a few weeks. But anyway, I'm very excited about it. It can do some funky features, even mocking.
Nice.
So in case for the less testing inclined listeners, mocking is where you take an existing class and you want to get a version that is basically like a puppet, that you can tell it that when, hey, somebody calls this method with this arguments, just return this value. I don't want you to run any kind of logic. That's not what I'm testing here. And it's a really interesting challenge because you kind of have to create classes on the go instead of having the user write these classes themselves. So that was a fun time, or making the tests work without leaving the editor, with actually running the game, so you have access to all the Godot features. So there is some fun stuff there, and I also hope to bring basically a fresh take on testing with Vest, because Qt is pretty much the go-to solution at this point, and it's deserved, I think. So I was asking myself, why publish another solution to this problem that is already solved? And really it's just because I had fun building it, and that I hope that I can bring like a new valuable spin on the whole thing.
Unit testing was such an important part of my development path, and I think I even stumbled upon something that was like what's it called, test first development or unit test first development or something like that, where you write your unit test first, you put in your your mock stuff, and you write from there. And I found that I couldn't write projects like that, like I couldn't do it from the other way. But yeah, having the capability to do mock functions and be able to run that within the editor and mock objects and that sort of thing was really powerful in my unit test experience. So I'm looking forward to that. Like, so you said maybe in a couple weeks or a couple months, what are we looking at?
Yeah, I think it's more on the weeks. Pretty much all the features are done. I think I'm finishing the documentations these days, so there's not much left, just the usual administrative things. And another reason to join the Discord server is that I plan to announce it there at first and leave a few weeks for people to try it out. And the reason is that with Netfox, I published the first version, so the version 1.0. I want to delay making breaking changes as long as possible, so that I don't just yank the library from under people's feet. There are some design choices with Netfox that, are not terrible, but I would like to change them, except I cannot until V2. So with Best, I want to share it on the Discord server. So basically it's a smaller audience, but before committing to V1. So this way, if there's some, obvious pain points, I can still fix them if they need breaking changes before the release. And yeah, I guess it's a server perk that you get to see stuff first. So yeah, it's time to join, I guess.
Everybody needs to jump in if you want to support multiplayer stuff at all, or if you're interested in that. I mean, I love seeing what you guys are talking about over there, and a lot of times the same problems that you're having, somebody else is already chatting about it. Like, I'll go in there and search for the keywords, and there's you, and then sub 7, and then the yellow architect already answered the question 3 times. So I'm like, all right, I won't bug them today. But yeah, other than that though, yeah, definitely join the Netfox server, and absolutely plug your side project. You know what I mean? I mean, that's, don't feel bad about that. Like, once you get something that you want to share or whatever, I don't think anybody's gonna mind seeing what you have to show off there.
Yeah, I hope so.
The 4-year game that you've had in the queue forever, what's going on with that, or do you have something else that might be more relevant now?
My toxic trait, so to say, is that I always end up with a bunch of projects, and then often having way too many of them, and then I have to cut some or put some on the back burner. But yeah, I really want to build a second example game for Netfox, slightly bigger than Forest Brawl, and preferred in a different genre, so more stuff is supported. And then I have Campfire, which is a survival game that I started building right after I have released Netfox. Basically, I built Netfox for that game. I mean, it's not exactly secret yet, I just haven't posted much about it recently, but there's a bunch of videos of it on my Twitter. And then once I'm done with that, I can start SimCorp, which was the initial idea in 2017 that put me on this whole multiplayer misery course, so to say. So yeah, maybe I can finish that by the time I'm 50.
Yeah, maybe.
It's just such a common trope with the video game era or genre in general. If you're just in this realm, this is such a relatable thing that everybody's got like a million unfinished game ideas and projects, and I've got like journals of just narratives and story and ideas that I'll never get to. I had a question here that what are some common multiplayer pitfalls?
Right, actually there is one that I personally fell victim to, in my earlier days is not testing your game under latency, specifically with one of the iterations of SimCorp. I had a bunch of mechanics in the game, was making really good progress. Like, dude, I can move around, I can shoot, I can switch weapons, I have all these things. All right, let's try it in multiplayer. And I tried it locally. It worked great. I even tried it on a different device. It worked great because it was on the local network. And then I added some latency and it absolutely fell apart. So yeah, that's important to make sure to check it with latency. Actually, nowadays I tend to test my features with simulated really bad connection. So 150 milliseconds of ping, and then potentially some jitter even, so that the data flow is not consistent. And if your game works okay at that rate, then you should be fine. Obviously, these numbers depend on your exact project, but for me, this is what I kind of want to try to support, even if not flawlessly, but still keep it playable. Not necessarily a pitfall per se, but there is one experience that I'm kind of not happy about, is when I was trying to research multiplayer, like in general, because I was kind of incredulous to how difficult it is. Like, surely they did it with Quake 3 in 1999. How difficult could it be? And it must be a solved problem already. So I even tried looking up YouTube videos, and I was so annoyed with them, to be frank, because I saw a bunch of these video game devlogs, and pretty much they boil down to, oh, when I made multiplayer, it's really difficult, so I had to roll my own, and we boop some code later, it just works. It took a lot of time. I'm like, dude, I understand that it took a lot of time. I'm looking for the details, and I get that most of these videos are for entertainment only, but still, at least a link would have been nice, or something. So that was quite disappointing when, trying to figure out how to build something like this, or if anybody has done so already.
I feel your frustration there when you go and you look for a solution, and I end up having more questions. Yeah, which isn't a bad thing, but it gets, at least it got you kind of thinking about it, and your gears turning on it. But yeah, I've seen that. Oh, this was good. I enjoyed this talk, and I'm excited to see, Netfox a year. Let's do this again. After some time has passed, and maybe one of us will have a game. And I mean, I keep saying that, like, I'm gonna make this game, and I start it. And then I even make a video on it, and I feel bad because I've basically got busy with other stuff, and it's like, you get it.
Yeah. Well, and also, dude, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to rant about various topics. I do tend to end up ranting, and I do enjoy ranting, so it was really nice to have the space for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your contribution to the, Godot community and just multiplayer community in general. I think it goes a lot farther than probably either of us realize. So thanks to you, and thank you to everybody that's committing changes and developing and contributing to the conversation. And so check out Netfox. If there's something that you want to see in your multiplayer game, go over there and bug those guys, and make sure to pick up a mug or a shirt. I know I probably will. I mean, did you design that logo, the little Netfox graphic on your? Where's your mug at? Do you still have your mug?
Yeah. Also, it's kind of funny because it gets mirrored, so it's not Netfox, it's Xofdom, but still. And actually, the little ears are based on Godot's Wi-Fi signals, or whatever is the exact color, exact shape.
It looks fantastic. I love it. So thanks for taking the time and meeting with me today, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same here.